What's going on, my dudes? Oscar back, and it is almost time. The time is nigh upon us to close out Goodnight Punpun. Today I'm gonna be reviewing volumes 5 and 6, and that's gonna bring us that much closer to seeing what this whole bizarre, tragic journey has been leading towards. And I've actually started volume 7, and so hopefully by the time that this video comes out, I'll be done with the whole series. It's been one hell of a journey, and despite the insane ups and downs, and coinciding with my own life and just going through my own problems and resonating with certain parts of this story, I have anticipation, have just like this growing anticipation within me about like how it's all gonna end and where it's gonna end and what's gonna happen. As I've said, I'm in the middle of volume 7 now, so once I finish reading it, I'm gonna start writing my review for volume 7. But in the meantime, since this is about 5 and 6, I wrote an ungodly amount for both of these volumes, especially for volume 6. And so I hope that you'll join me. We'll take this journey together and talk about some of the events from volume 5 and 6. And by the next video I do, we'll close it all out. And that'll be the end of my first Let's Review. It feels like a journey is coming to an end. Let's review Goodnight Punpun, volumes 5 and 6. Punpun traded the wild hair from volume 3 for a hipster stash. His manga also goes face down fast. The editor thinks it's boring, and Punpun's life as a mangaka crashes into 100 pieces. It wasn't really his dream anyway, but Sachi Nanjo's. In a way, he was just along for the ride. He does fall back into his depression though, as Punpun is a perpetual sad boy. His lease is up, and he still hasn't seen or fucked Aiko. It's been 2 years. He told himself at the end of 2 years, if nothing in his life had changed by age 20, he was going to kill himself. He does find new purpose though in impersonating another dude. While Punpun is having his life crisis, there is another guy who I think makes his first appearance in like volume 3, and his name is Toshiki Hoshikawa, or Pegasus. He's weird as shit, but has become a staple throughout the series. He's running for mayor now and has become more and more pronounced with each new volume. He is essentially a cult leader for a group called the 12 Scales of some shit or other. He's foretelling the end of the world, warning people of their impending ends. A man tells him to get a job, to which Toshiki replies, "I love you to bits." According to him, the world is going to end July 7th. I also think it would be funny and or cool if I could finish and drop my last Goodnight Punpun review by July 7th. As of this writing, it is May 11th, and I've just finished volume 5, taking a break before commencing volume 6. This volume was jam-packed with tense situations. There is so much to unpack here, but there is no going back. We have to see it through to the end now, how it'll all unfold. The Maneki Neko obsessed real estate guy, the old-timer, Shishido-san, gets tackled by security when they think he's shoplifting. Meanwhile, Seki recollects his childhood and seeing Shimizu's mom getting hit by a truck. Kinda wonder if she'll get isekai'd to another world. It does help to explain their relationship a little more. Seki feels like he grew up while Shimizu lives in a fantasy, and in a way he really does, because while Shimizu's mom has been dead for at least 10 years, every day before leaving home, she tells Shimizu to have a good day. That revelation gave me chills. All these volumes, seeing her hand wave just out of frame, and she's been dead all that time. Seki, despite feeling like he's the smartest person in any room, has a lack of understanding of other people's feelings, especially Shimizu. He's described this guardian protector role to himself and sees Shimizu as someone to be coddled and protected, all stemming from what happened right before their eyes as children. The thing is, Shimizu is no longer a child and hates being treated like one. He strikes out on his own and ends up with Toshiki Hoshikawa's 12 Scales cult. I really hope that nothing bad happens to Shimizu. He's too pure-hearted and kind for this story. Things between Punpun and Sachi are at a bit of a standstill. Sachi exceeds exceptionally well at pushing everyone that gets near to her completely away. Sachi is such a complex person that I don't want to be cliche and say it's just that she doesn't want to get hurt. There is a whole network of inner workings within her that makes up the ticking time bomb of her existence. Sachi is a great example of someone who has so much talent but is also afraid of what comes next. She's an adult who didn't make a living of her niche creativity, and now that she has the opportunity to do so, she's freaked out by it. Not to mention her constant need to disagree with or disarm everything and everyone that doesn't fit her militant worldview. Sachi is difficult, stubborn, kind of an asshole, but deep down she's hiding her fragility. She's hiding her true feelings. Perhaps like Punpun, she's lonely but doesn't know how to be vulnerable, so instead she lashes out. Aiko makes her triumphant return finally, and I appreciate the look Inyo Asano is giving her. She's skinny, almost malnourished. She looks like someone who's had the rough life we've expected her to have. Still, she's beautiful and looks so delicate despite having prickly thorns we'll later see. Punpun tells Aiko several lies. He tells her his mom remarried and his last name is now Fujikawa, though as the reader we know his mom passed away something like 4 years prior. The name he is using is of course the name of his next door neighbor, Taka Fujikawa. The ugly neighbors finally reveal themselves to Punpun, and Taka is friendly, outgoing, while his girlfriend is a little more skittish. He's athletic and has friends, a life that Punpun wishes he had. Punpun jerks off to this guy, to wanting to be fucked by him, and in a bizarre way, become him. Punpun Onodera dies mid-coitus, and a doppelganger of Taka Fujikawa is born. Punpun goes to get his license, set on getting out of the city in which he lives because his problems couldn't possibly find him in a new city. But as anyone who has ever tried to escape their problems by running knows, it don't fix shit. Of all the people to come across while sitting in the lobby, he comes back into contact with Aiko. They go to lunch together and begin to tell each other lie after lie. At one point, Punpun even lures Aiko to a love hotel and tries to get her to have sex with him against her will. It was awkward and began to border rape. As you could tell, she was clearly uncomfortable. Punpun had Aiko and lost her all in the same day because he couldn't control his desires. Before that though, as they're talking about themselves and their lives, Aiko paints this picture of herself having a dream life. She has a boyfriend who does outdoorsy stuff with his friends and she's a full-time model. Punpun thinks to himself, this isn't the Aiko I remember. He's created this idealized version of her in his mind, who is perfect and without fault, and in reality she is the opposite. She's a human being. She's flawed and imperfect, but there is beauty in one's imperfections. It reminded me of the Don John film starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Scarlett Johansson, where Miss Johansson's character has this idealized version of the perfect man and the perfect relationship, but it isn't real. Her standards are insane, and she is ultimately extremely controlling, but in her eyes, that is not only love, but true love. That is where Punpun is in this series. He keeps living in a daydream, and whenever anything interrupts this meticulous creation, he breaks down and becomes suicidal. It's psychotic, and Aiko is unknowingly getting swept up into the madness. Or maybe she's a part of it in her own way. We'll see what happens next. I feel like Inyo Asano did a phenomenal job crafting Aiko. She is vulnerable, delicate, and all over her body she wears signs of abuse. Her mother, though incapacitated, still beats her and expects Aiko to work and take care of the both of them. Aiko doesn't have the extravagant life she painted for Punpun the day they went out for lunch. She's lonely and miserable, living with an abusive parent. She wants an out, and having her license and a car will provide that for her. This is someone created for the reader to want to protect. I feel that Inyo Asano is manipulating the reader into wanting the best for Aiko, although it is way more likely it's only going to get worse from here. I see Aiko and I want to embrace her and tell her everything is going to be okay, not Punpun. He criticizes her at every turn and even gets upset when she wants to rush immediately over to tell her mom she's moving out. It's become pretty clear Punpun has narcissistic tendencies. The more I see and the more I read, the clearer the picture becomes that he is his mother's son. Whatever Mama Onodera had that made her suicidal and depressive, she passed it on to her son. I've made this claim before in my last video, and it feels clearer than ever. Pot meet kettle. Sachi is about to have an abortion. She got knocked up by her ex-husband and wants someone to be there for emotional support. Punpun tells her he'll go along, but after meeting up with Aiko and getting swept up with her and his lifelong feelings towards her, he runs off with Aiko instead. In this volume, Punpun finally has sex with Aiko, at which point we learn she was still a virgin, or at least that much is implied as there is blood afterwards. It's what Punpun's wanted for years, to have Aiko back and to have sex with her, not to make love to her or to cherish her, but to fuck her. And he gets that wish. Still, it doesn't seem to be enough. He got what he wanted, but he still feels hollow and empty. Aiko is a regular ass person, not this dream girl he envisioned her being all those years he yearned after her, and she's going to move in. At least now, he'll have her all to himself. I have this snaking feeling that this is all going to end terribly. Seeing Hoshikawa wearing the 2001 party glasses and knowing what happened with Y2K, where a lot of people thought the world was going to end. Some people even killed themselves prior to 2000. Computers were supposedly going to crash and the whole world was going to be thrown into disarray. Then nothing happened. Nothing at all. It was the same deal in 2012. I even heard a really tragic story about a family that all committed suicide right before the 2012 ball dropped. It's insane how much people feed into this shit. As people, I think many of us need purpose to survive. I find purpose in my videos and the stories I write and in keeping myself busy. I've talked about my anxiety and depression many times before. I have to always be busy to keep myself sane. That's my purpose. Others find purpose in many different things, but there are people still that feel they need to be given that by others because they can't find it within themselves. I think it's the reason certain types of human beings are so easily lured into and become targets for cults. Aiko grew up in a cult, and her mom was devoted to the cult for as long as we, the readers, have known her. I mean, she came to Punpun's house with a crazy woman trying to sell spiritual water. Uncle Yuichi and this crazy cult woman had a brutal verbal altercation which was parts funny and parts sad, knowing Aiko had no choice but to be a part of that world. What if some of that still lingers within her? I have this weird feeling that she may end up killing herself. July 7th is supposedly the end of the world. I don't know what happens next, or for how long, or how much time this will all cover, but if that changes between where I am now and finishing volume 6, I'll correct myself later. I will keep this writing as a way to mark my progression through this volume and noting how it all changes from section to section, unless it's Punpun that ends up killing her. He did achieve one thing that I assumed he would. He does kill someone after all, Aiko's abusive mother. However, we later learn that he may not have been the one to deal the finishing blow. The darkest part of him, the part that lay dormant, his god, awakens while Aiko's mom is still trying to kill her. She stabs Aiko in the side and cuts the back part of her dress. She even almost stabs Punpun himself. The light within him switches off and his god, that all-devouring blackness, takes hold. After burying Aiko's mom, they set about haphazardly planning their next move. They fart around for a bit, driving aimlessly, until they finally set on going to Kagoshima like they'd planned since they were kids. Aiko tries to convince Punpun at one point that it isn't okay to kill and that he shouldn't rejoice in it. However, it feels like that light within him that was switched off, that bulb is burned, and there may be no replacing it. It's also become clearer and clearer that Punpun really doesn't love Aiko. I feel like I've said this before too, probably in my Volume 5 notes. Punpun loves the idealized version of Aiko he's fantasized about in his head, but not Aiko herself. He demonstrates this by calling her nasty names. He calls her dumb and constantly rags on her, though at the same time, Aiko is no angel either. She stabs Punpun in the eye with a fork, but doesn't fully gouge his eye out, and this upsets Punpun because he wants her to commit. He's fully embraced the lingering darkness within himself. His awakening has led me to believe he could easily become one of those people you sometimes see on Japanese TV that stabs a train full of people. It could happen in this story for all I know, though I doubt it will, and I'd be left thinking, why did no one ever try to get this kid psychiatric care? Well, probably because that sort of thing is typically frowned upon in Japanese society. Mental health care doesn't have a huge level of importance there. If anything, it's seen as taboo to go see a psychiatrist. To them, it means there's something really wrong with you, and you become essentially ostracized. In a culture where work ethic is number one and taking personal time off is seen as a negative, it doesn't surprise me. It's also probably part of the reason there are so many active cults in Japan. All these people needing a guiding voice, someone to tell them they matter and what they're doing matters. Then one day, you and all the people you've come to love and see as more than a friend, maybe even family, have to kill yourselves. In this case, this group, taking their lives, the 12-note scales, will stop the end of the world. When members within the group begin to object to killing themselves, Wada, Hoshikawa's right hand, takes it upon himself to burn them alive. He locks them up in their office where they'd met so many times before and flicks a lit cigarette onto a gasoline trail. All the while, he's framing Hoshikawa for the whole thing. If Hoshikawa believed himself a Jesus-like figure, then Wada is Judas Iscariot. That's not to say Hoshikawa wasn't unhinged as all fuck though, breaking into people's apartments and smashing them over the face with a hammer. It wasn't an effort in his delusional state to eliminate the black marks. Wada, who only believes in absolutes, can't leave anything to chance, so he takes it upon himself to see it all through. At the same time, Seki is sleeping with his boss's daughter, and it's a relationship that comes to an abrupt end when he decides he no longer wants to sleep with her. This angers the girl, who then turns around and tells dear old dad, who if I remember correctly is Yakuza, that Seki struck her and tried to assault her. Now Seki is moving around trying to avoid a beating, while at the same time he's made contact with Wada. These two are sides of the same coin. Where Seki didn't go through with and kill the man he'd been hired to off, Wada has no qualms whatsoever about killing the entirety of the 12-note scales. Wada has a job for Seki to press a button, and that's it. It will affect the change, but beyond that, Wada is vague as to the purpose of this button Seki is supposed to press. These are two moody, prose-spewing entities, though Wada is more of a chaotic neutral that by the end of the volume becomes chaotic evil, and Seki seems to border neutral to sort of chaotic neutral. Seki goes to where he needs to go to do the job he's been paid to do, and when he gets there, he finds a tape and a tape player. The tape is for him, a confession of sorts by Wada, explaining his believed position in the world and what he has to do to see Hoshikawa's plan through. Though before Seki can collect said tape, a small, frail old woman comes in. It turns out the important job Wada had for Seki was to turn on the TV for his senile old mother. This likely means Wada intended to die with the 12-note scales, or he is going to turn himself into the police. Volume 7 will likely hold the answer. Elsewhere, Sachi is worried and playing detective, looking for clues as to Punpun's whereabouts. Her search leads her to meet up with all their previous acquaintances and friends. She meets up with the crazy old Maneki Neko collector, Shishido-san's daughter, asks if Punpun has been around. The woman tells Sachi he'd been practicing to get his real estate license. She informs Sachi that Punpun hasn't been around though, but that it was obvious he'd been trying his best before the disappearance. The woman gives Sachi Punpun's room key, and what she finds within are blood-stained sheets and some of Aiko's panties. Sachi, despite all her efforts to the contrary, is evolving. She's taking responsibility, being a real-life adult, and trying to do right by someone other than herself. She also has a moment where she feels the need to break away from herself, from her old militant viewpoint. She cuts her hair. It's liberating, freeing up all the baggage and being able to once again breathe. Sachi is a good friend. She is definitely stubborn and strong-willed, but she cares. Not many people would go to the lengths for another person that she does. Her quest for answers leads her to find Punpun's dad and ask about Punpun. What I liked about this section is that it plays out in a frame-by-frame exchange between what Punpun is up to at that exact moment. Punpun sees someone reading Sachi's manga in a Young Jump style magazine, and he asks the guy reading it about the story, how he likes it. Guy says it's boring, no one gets it. This apparently insanely triggers Punpun because he follows the man outside and picks up a can he left behind, litter, and then proceeds to follow him even farther. While this is going on, Sachi is speaking with Papa Punyama, learning about Punpun's childhood and how a scooter-involved accident with a friend of Punpun's is the reason he initially began to crawl into himself, becoming an introvert or hikikomori. Punpun lectures this guy about littering, even carrying the can with him. He hands the guy back the can, berating him all the while. The litter bug agrees to return the can to a receptacle, but along the way makes a comment about Punpun's demeanor. This is what breaks the camel's back. It wasn't even about littering. This guy negatively critiqued Sachi's manga, coupled with Punpun's ever-growing frustration, realizing that sooner or later he may be going to prison for murder, and on top of that, fleeing a murder scene. It all piles up until he finally snaps and attacks this complete stranger with a big piece of wood. Who can say how much further it would have gone had Aiko not intervened? Punpun is completely unhinged now. Whatever innocence he once held, that shit is long gone. He's now not only suicidal and unhinged, he's also now homicidal, going 0 to 100 at the drop of a hat. The urge that I talked about before to protect Aiko is definitely growing stronger within me. I had speculated about her life before in earlier volumes and what she had been through, and it makes sense now why she is the way she is. There is definitely a childishness within her, and I don't think it's just Inio Asano trying to infantilize Aiko to appeal to men that want to protect women they see as weaker than them. It's all on her deceased mother. Aiko was never allowed to grow up, to become a woman, to have sex, and to mature. She spent the whole of her life in service to her demanding and insane parent. The same parent that tried to stab her to death when Aiko finally stood up to her and told her enough was enough. If there is a victim in this whole story, I'd say it's her. Aiko, who never, not even once, stood a chance. Yeah, Punpun's mom was fucked up and she did treat him like shit sometimes, but she never did the kind of psychologically twisted things Aiko's abusive mother did to her. Despite everything she'd been through and seen and how horrible it's all been, to see Aiko smile and dance and try to find joy in even the smallest thing, from filling out a prayer card to dancing on the shoreline, dress flying up above her underwear. In those fleeting moments, she's free of it all, of her mom, of the repercussions, and of Punpun's insults. For once, on their long, tragic journey, Punpun finally compliments her. Then, he tries to kill her. Aiko begs for her life, tells Punpun she doesn't want to die as he begins to strangle her with a piece of rope. It's the most intense scene yet, even more affecting than Punpun hunting down the litter bug or helping to kill Aiko's mom. For a moment, I thought this was it. One more volume to go, and Aiko won't even be in it. I felt this hollowness growing within me at the thought of her no longer being alive. Then she confesses. Aiko tells Punpun she's the one who killed her mother. After Punpun's strangulation attempt, her mother comes to, and Aiko takes the knife that the woman dropped and repeatedly impales her with it. It is true, Punpun had stepped away to answer the door and receive a package for Mrs. Takano, Aiko's mom. When he comes back, Aiko has already stabbed her mom. Aiko apologizes profusely for pulling Punpun into her mess. She calls him an innocent bystander and tells him he can leave, go away, as he didn't actually kill anyone. It's far too late now though, as Aiko's mom's body has been found and ID'd, and Aiko herself, who is described as missing, may be a suspect. What a journey. You know, just reading the series, and I remember when I first picked it up and being excited to start Goodnight Punpun and wondering, like what was going to happen. Well, I kind of already knew, where it was all headed because I'd seen, people talk about it. And it's one of those series that you're inevitably, sooner or later, going to see somebody, talk about it. But it's like one of those things until like you experience it for yourself and see how insane it actually is, and everything that happens and what happens to the characters contained within. I don't know where it's gonna go just yet. I don't know how it's gonna end, but seeing the explosion at the end of volume 6 and the thing with Wada's mom where he asks Seki, you know, to press a button, or he'll pay Seki. Wada will pay Seki to press a button, and it'll affect the change. And it's one of those things where, like, at first I thought that button was going to be the explosion, but it's just, he just wants him to turn his senile old mom's TV on for her. There's like so much, you know, detail and so much character development and so much just going on in this story with all these characters. And I like that, you know, even though Seki and Shimizu's stories don't, you know, interact with what Punpun is doing, they're kind of separate from it, even though they do kind of interact with Aiko a little bit. That, you know, Inyo Asano still focuses on them, and the story isn't completely about Punpun, and there are other characters, you know, like Sachi, who was a favorite character of mine, one of the best written characters I think in the whole series. There's just so much detail and love and dedication that went into Goodnight Punpun, and I look forward to reading more of Inyo Asano's work in the future. I do have Dead Demons Destruction. Let's all start that at some point, maybe do some videos about it. But it's wild, you know, like this is it. Like I'm coming to the end of my Goodnight Punpun Let's Reviews. By next one, the last volume will be the last Let's Review for Goodnight Punpun, and then I'm going to start reviewing Prison School. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to say too much here just because I feel like I said everything that I needed to say in the last two parts about the volumes. I just wanted to close the video out and say thank you for hanging out with me. It does mean the world to me that anybody would watch these. Like, I work really hard on these videos. Like, I do so much scripting, and just between editing and everything, it takes like a couple of weeks just to do one of these videos. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. It does mean the world to me. Please take care of yourselves.